Now at 5:45, Forethought. Bali Rai gives a personal view in front of an audience at the Royal Society for the Encouragement of Arts, Manufactures and Commerce in London. The presenter is Ben Hammersley.
Welcome to the RSA and to Forethought, a series of talks offering a personal viewpoint. Tonight's speaker, Bali Rai, is an award-winning author of novels for teenagers. He believes passionately in the power of the written word to inspire as well as to educate. And he is an assiduous speaker at schools and colleges up and down the country. In 1 year alone, he visited a total of 147. One of the messages he is keen to get across is also the theme of his talk tonight. Born in Leicester, of Indian descent, he dislikes pinning a label on himself or on anyone else that defines him or other people in terms of their race. What may seem a positive emotion, like pride in racial identity, can, in fact, turn out to be the flip side of racism. At least this, he will tell us, has been his personal experience. Ladies and gentlemen, Bali Rai.
As you've just heard, I visit a lot of schools as part of what I do. I speak to thousands of teenagers every year, not just in the UK, across the world. I remember going into one school with a book I'd written called The Last Taboo. The book is about racial tensions between the African Caribbean black community and the so-called British Asian brown community, for want of a better word. Because it's about racism and it's got some quite vicious racist characters, there's quite a lot of quite vicious racist language. I'm talking to a group of year 8s. There's a young man staring at me as I'm talking, and the minute I give them the opportunity to put their hands up and ask a question, his hand shoots up. And I said, "Have you got a question?" He said, "No." And I said, "Well, have you got a comment you'd like to make?" He said, "Yes." I said, "What is that comment?" "You're a racist." And I looked at him and said, "I've just spent 10 minutes telling you that I'm kind of a virulent anti-racist. What makes you think I'm a racist?" "You use the N-word in the book." "Yeah." "And then there's the racist P word." "Yeah." "And loads of others." "Yeah." "But if you aren't a racist, why have you put those words into the book?" And so we started talking about context. And I started talking to him about how I use those words to describe people in my stories. Because, and this is something I started thinking about, as a society, it's something that I believe we get taught to do. And I started wondering about thinking more deeply about my own experience growing up in Leicester, which is the most racial and culturally mixed city anywhere in the UK outside of London. I've grown up around people from every kind of background you can think of, every kind of race, religion, culture, God knows how many countries. Racism is probably one of the most common topics I talk about when it comes to discussions as well in schools. When I give teenagers an opportunity to stand and speak or sit and make comments, it's something that they're interested in. It's something that a lot of the teenagers, most that I meet, they don't really understand. And I talk to them about what it's like, especially the ones that don't live in a particularly multicultural environment, what it's like to grow up around people from every kind of background. I tell them stories about my own experience, some of which I'm going to share with you a little later. But I want to pose possibly a simplistic thought, but I want to pose a thought. I want to place a thought in your heads today. What if we lived in a world where race not only didn't matter, but the concept of it didn't actually exist? Would that be a better world, or would humans simply find something else with which to discriminate? Hair colour, the size of your posterior, the size of my nose, which is quite large for those of you who can't see, and I know this is a radio broadcast, so that's all of you. It is quite large. It's something I used to get picked on about a lot when I was at school. You know, will we find something else to discriminate by? And why would you want to do away with racial differences anyway? Isn't there an argument that racial pride is possibly a fundamental to self-esteem for people who are being racially abused, for black people living in apartheid South Africa, wasn't the civil rights movement in the States partly driven by a pride in racial appearance? I understand that those things can be important. But I also believe that if we go too far with the concept of racial identity and racial pride and self-identity, that it becomes just another extreme. As I said, I've grown up around people from all kinds of backgrounds. I learnt about my friends and the cultural, religious differences that we had, often by mistake. I remember trying to encourage a friend of mine who was Muslim. And this is at the age of 5 or 6, not really understanding what a Muslim was, just knew that I knew lots of them. And I tried to get him to eat a sausage sandwich. And I couldn't for the life of me understand why he wouldn't eat this sausage sandwich. And he wouldn't tell me initially, and I kept trying to force this sandwich at him, going, go and have it. What's wrong with it? It's really nice. It's got brown sauce in it. No. And it was only when I found out a little later that, because he got very angry with me and left, but it's when I found out later that Muslim people don't eat pork as part of their religion that I learnt something. Another example, the word I'm going to use is a Jamaican word. It's often seen as quite a rude word. It's relatively rude, but it's not particularly horrible. It translates as used toilet paper. The word is bumbaclart. It's a word that a Jamaican-descended British-born friend of mine once used, and when I asked him what it meant, he said, dunno, me dad uses it. So I asked his older brother, who was quite a few years older than us, Des, what does this word mean? What word? Bumbaclart. I'm not telling you. He started laughing, said, I'm not going to tell you. So whatever you do, don't ever use that word in front of an old Jamaican person because they're going to kill you. Now, I'm very inquisitive. If I don't get the last clue in the crosswords, I will go home, I will cheat. I'll go online and I will find out what the answer is. Okay, it just does my head in. If there's a word when I was young I didn't understand, I went and ran, got a dictionary, and I found out what that word meant. The word bumbaclart went around in my head for days, weeks, over and over. What does it mean? Until one day, very stupidly, I decided to ask an old Jamaican lady walking down the road what that word meant. Her reaction nowadays would probably be deemed child abuse, but she beat me. And I tell you what, if I was her, I would have beat me too. This learning about race, this learning about other human, not necessarily race, but culture and language and identity, learning as something you do just as an incidental thing, it's just part of your life. That, for me, I think, is the best way to learn about these differences. You see, race, in my opinion, is just a social construct. It's one of those things that we've created as a society, as a country, as a world. It's not something that we're born with. It's not something that exists in us inherently from the day that we arrive on this earth. You only need to consider that no child on earth is born with a racial prejudice. You take 3 children of different races, a black child, an Asian child, as in a brown-skinned child, a white-skinned child. At the age of 3, you put them in a sandbox and you give them 2 toys between the 3 of them. They probably are going to fight. They're going to fight over the fact that there aren't enough toys. But the white child at the age of 3 is not going to look at the black child and say, I don't like you because you're black, because they have no concept of what race is at that age. I want to live in a world where that continues up until the day that they die. On the other hand, negative experiences do happen in childhood. My nephew, at the age of 5, at a school in Sutton Coldfield, approached a young boy in his class and said, can I be your friend? This is what my nephew said exactly. I said, what did you say? Can I be your friend? And what did the boy say? No. Did you ask him why? Yeah. What did he say? He said, I can't play with you because you're brown. That 5-year-old was taught that. He didn't just dream that up. And again, it's about thinking about what that means, thinking about what we're teaching our young people. And I've got to be honest, when I was growing up, half of my family, actually, I'm being dishonest, 3/4 probably, had racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic views, any kind of ism you can think of. I have an uncle who I call Hitler in a turban. I call him Hitler Singh. This is a man that not only doesn't understand what Sikhism is about, because you cannot be a racist and be Sikh. It's not possible if you understand anything to do with Sikhism. This is a man that hates everybody. He's lived in England for 40 years. Over 40 years, he hates white people. Why on earth would you move to a country that's predominantly white if you don't like white people? How does this work? He doesn't even like other brown Asian people. If you're a Muslim, he doesn't like you. If you're Hindu, he doesn't like you. If you're black, then he definitely doesn't like you. I've never understood why people feel so strongly about their race. What makes people proud to be a certain race? And why? As I said, I understand sometimes that it's a reaction to racial abuse, to discrimination. I understand that, up to a certain point. But beyond that, I don't. And when it gets to a point where people point at other people and say, I'm proud to be different to you because I'm a different colour, then for me, it becomes a problem. None of us choose what we look like. It's all an accident of birth. And you just have to get on with it. You don't get to choose to be black, white, or whatever. You know what I'm talking about. It's ridiculous. So when I hear people say, I'm proud to be white, I'm proud to be black, I'm proud to be Indian, I'm proud to be whatever, often I look at them and I say, I'm proud of the ceiling. I beg your pardon? But why should we be proud of something we don't control? Why aren't we proud of what we have in our hearts, and what we have in our heads, and what we do with those things? And why are we teaching our young people to think about race as something that is definitive, rather than something that is completely and utterly accidental? As an author, it's something that I face. I'm constantly described as a British Asian author. And I want to kill the people that do it. One of my good friends, Mallory Blackman, who's a fantastic writer, we talk about this constantly. She has the same issue. She once said to me, I get described as a black British author. Often they throw female in as well, just in case you can't tell. Okay? And she said, Jacqueline Wilson, who's somebody else that we know, another writer that we know, another fantastic writer, never gets described as a white British author. So why the need to talk about our racial background, mine and Mallory's? And then there's these crazy notions that people end up having because of race. I went to a school I think it was on the border of Cornwall and Devon, but I'm going to say Cornwall. Again, anybody Cornish, I apologise. I know you're not all like this. I walk in, I'm talking away, the principal comes up, she says to me, it must be very difficult, all these school visits you do. And I thought, not really, but I wanted to be polite, so I said, they can be tiring, but I love them, I enjoy them, I'm very passionate about what I do. But all the travelling, yeah, it can be tiring, but I just generally fall asleep. But how does this work? I mean, do you spend 6 months of your year in England and the rest in India? Or is it 3 months? And I'm standing looking at her, I'm thinking, can you hear my accent? And I'm sure I mentioned Leicester in at least one of the 4 speeches I've given at her school. And in the end, I just said, well, I'm from Leicester. And I know a lot of people think it's India, but it's not. I want young people to understand that we're not different first, that we are the same first, that we have more in common, more that binds us together than we have that separates us. If racism is taught, I'll repeat from the beginning, if it is taught, and it is, then not only can we unteach it, we can stop teaching it. And then maybe, just maybe, we end up living in a world where we judge people and we value people based on what they achieve and what they're like as human beings, and not because of the colour of their skin. Thank you.